Hello there, I'm Chris Stashew.
I'm Mike White.
And this is Father Malone.
And we're the hosts of Dreams for Sale, a monthly look at the Twilight Zone 1985. On this episode of Dreams for Sale, we're going to be looking at episode 5 of the first season of the 1985 series that's broken up into 2 segments, If She Dies and Ye Gods. So, fellas, let's get right into If She Dies.
What if Paul Milano had turned right instead of left? Hit the brakes a millisecond quicker. Or if. The word ticks like a crazy clock, trying to reclaim a single tragic second from the Twilight Zone.
How long was this segment?
20 minutes?
It really,
about
it
22.
flew by.
Right, it really did. So this episode, the entire episode aired October 25th, 1985. This segment is directed by John Hancock, written by David Bennett Karen, and stars Tony LoBianco as a father who is convinced by a ghost of a little girl to buy a bed from an orphanage. Boy, this is a really interesting segment. I don't really know what was happening in it for the most part.
It does seem pretty scattershot.
Yeah.
Yeah, yes. It seems like there's a lot of ideas and none of them, there's a lot of ideas, but they don't end up being like a cohesive idea, if that makes sense.
Yeah, because there's this whole thing about the father and his little girl, and they make a wrong turn, and there's a car accident, so she's in the hospital, and then that ties into the orphanage and the bed and the little girl ghosts, and basically buy this bed, put the little girl in it, and then I guess she gets possessed by the spirit of the dead girl? Is that how you guys are reading it too?
Sir, we need to point out that it is Kimmy Gibbler from Full House is the small child in this episode, which...
Yeah, she sure is.
To answer your question, Mike, I guess I don't know.
It's pretty ambiguous. I'm going to go with that she is possessed of this new ghost girl. Which is probably the only redeeming aspect of the episode, as far as the ideas thrown out there.
I'm going to go with she's not possessed, and that the doll, the bear toy, is what is used to bring her soul back from the brink?
I think so. Or is it the bed? This is so bizarre.
It's so ambiguous that it's actually really, and I'm not trying to deride the episode, but it's almost it's stupid. It's like they don't care about the rules.
Are there rules?
That's my point.
Yeah. I mean, what's weird is it like the orphanage is run by the Roman Catholic Church. There's a nun there. It's been closed down.
The orphanage is run by Amanda Kruger, is who it's run by.
Yeah, she sure is. Yeah, that was a little bit weird to see her as another nun. Like, I guess she was on her way to the asylum after this episode. But Roman Catholicism eschews any sort of like supernatural validity. So it's sort of weird that they all these nuns know about this story, about this little girl and her doll Toby, and that she's a ghost and that she's come back, and they've somehow held on to this bed that did she sleep in the bed? Like, was it her bed? Like, is that a possessed object or a cursed object or something? Or is it the doll? I don't know.
Mike White, weigh in on this one for us, please.
Yeah, you guys got me on this, because I could not figure out what was going on, and the way that the nun was keeping the doll and didn't want to give it up. And how did he end up with the doll anyway? Did I blink and I missed it?
We all must have blinked at the same time, because I must have missed it as well.
Yeah, I mean, he wants it. She won't give it to him, and then
okay,
yeah, and then he has the doll.
The doll. Well, no, I guess he gets the doll from the nun,
right?
But she doesn't want to give it to him.
I guess so.
I have to say, I'm David Kieran, the writer on this episode. I was very curious about his other things that he did, and he wrote just a ton of stuff, but he also wrote a bunch of Next Generation things, and that's the only thing of his that I've seen pretty much every episode that he's written. And I gotta say, probably some of the weaker episodes of Star Trek The Next Generation, including at least one of the worst holodeck episodes that there has been, where they dress up like Robin Hood and the Merry Men, the Cupid episode.
Oof,
so
that is so bad.
I'm not real impressed with this guy's track record, is what I'm trying to say.
Well, and the thing is, for me, is when you watch the beginning of the episode, it has this really kind of interesting hook. It's like, you know, the opening narration, which you heard before we started talking about this episode, it almost makes it sound like this is going to be something else. This is going to be a different kind of story.
Well, yeah, especially
and it ends up being some sort of like weird, this is like, for me, this almost could have been, and Father Malone, you'll appreciate this, a Tales from the Crypt episode if it had gone a little farther at the end where it's like, and now she's possessed.
Yeah, I agree with that.
This
you know,
thing where he turned left instead of turning right, and it seems like, okay, are we going to get two timelines, and one was the left turn and one's the right turn, and we're going to switch somewhere near the middle of the episode, or maybe the last third of it, and we'll see what that right turn would have looked like? I mean, it just seemed like a really weird intro to this episode.
I think that opening narration is just such like it promises an episode that was going to be much better than the one we were delivered. I too was hoping we were going to get some sort of weird, if only in the man's head, where he explores the possibilities of what could have happened on that day. And maybe it could have been much darker or much lighter or anything, because what we ended up getting was this kind of not so much there episode that about possession. And I don't know. It was, I really liked the dynamic between the father and the daughter in this episode. I thought it, again, just like the opening narration, it promised something that we were going to get a little more, because this idea that, you never see really the father and the daughter without the mother. It's always sort of the other way around. The father is not in the picture. And like, there could have been an interesting story to tell about these two characters. And, once she goes into this coma, like, the possibilities were wide open, but instead it just turned into this bizarre investigation where, like, even that part of it where she's in the coma at the hospital. Speaking as someone who has had family members in the hospital, you tend not to wander too far. You like, even if they say go home, you don't really do that. So the fact that he goes off and it turns into this investigation about this other ghost girl that he may or may not have seen, like, even that seemed muddle-headed to me.
Well, and the doctor has the worst bedside manner of any doctor I've ever experienced in TV or real life, where it's just like, you might as well give up hope. Fuck her.
Yeah, that guy's a fucking dickhead, dude. What the hell? He reminded me of the doctor from Arrested Development, played by Dan Castellaneta, who's like, I sewed your fingers on incorrectly. Who cares? It's like, what is happening in this episode?
And again, that would have played well into this is a figment of his imagination, and this is how he perceives the doctor to be, rather than this is how the doctor actually is. But yeah, whatever.
What I thought this episode was going to be was at the end, it was going to be like he had like a flash forward vision, and like at the end, it's like he's like stopped, and then he goes the other direction and nothing bad happens. But he has like a flash forward vision of like what would have happened to him and his daughter. Because
that could have been something.
Well, that's what the whole fucking narration sets up. It literally sets up a trying to reclaim a second, what if you had gone left instead of right? Which, by the way, on the last episode, the first segment we talked about was this very similar idea. Do I take the job or do I focus on my family? Do I go left or do I go right?
Well, maybe they thought, we handled that sort of question so well.
I'll tell you what, they handled it better in that episode than they did in this episode.
That's true. At least that was straightforward and didn't veer off into these bizarre tangents of ghostly beds or dolls.
Yeah, because it made no sense. It made zero sense. And it's thoroughly disappointing that it made no sense.
You know, it's a weird little aside. The guy who played that doctor, John Gowans, he eventually became the head of the Salvation Army.
Oh, wow.
Like in real life?
Yeah. Yes. In like 99, I read about him. He became the 16th general of the Salvation Army. Weird. Well, so I guess he has bedside manner, just not as that character.
Sure seems like a compassionate guy in this episode.
I don't know if you guys have ever seen, because this was directed by John Hancock, and he really, cut his teeth on a movie called Let's Scare Jessica to Death. And there's actually some things in that movie that kind of speak to this or vice versa, especially when it comes to that little girl and she's all in the white face paint and the white long nightgown and stuff. That really reminds me of the woman who I think she ends up being possessed in Let's Scare Jessica to Death, and she's wearing this long white dress and stuff. So, I mean, he can do spooky, and I actually really like that movie quite a bit. And in this, it's like, I mean, the guy should have maybe been a little bit more freaked out by this ghost child that approaches him, but I mean, nobody seemed to be on keel when it came to human emotions.
Yeah, it's ultimately just a mess. I mean, I do like the ending where, like, this might not even be his daughter, but even that would have been more interesting had they explored that, like, you know, like your daughter like comes out of the coma, but maybe it's not her. Maybe it's this ghost of this other thing. And that could have been the investigation and try to force that ghost out of his daughter and get his daughter back. Something. I don't know.
Right. Even if there was like a code thing that they would do, like one person says one thing, the other one always responds the same way, and then he says that to her and she doesn't know the response at the end, like, love you, honey boo, and she would say something in return, and she doesn't know it. So it's like, ooh, that's the other girl's spirit in there. But yeah, as it is, we're all three of us are sitting here going, was it the dead girl? Was it not? Was it Tony? Was it this? Was it, you know, who cares? And then by the end, really, I'm just saying, who cares? Let's move on.
Well, and my question is, my question to YouTube is like they do such a poor job of making us care to begin with that, like, at the end, I'm not even sure I care, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, I'm with you. I did kind of like the ambiguity at the end, but at the same time, like, we had sat through so much boring material that it can't even redeem it. I mean, sometimes you can redeem something with a good twist at the end of something, but this is definitely not that.
Well, a twist that leaves you just scratching your head going, was that a twist?
That's true.
Yeah, well, that's the thing, right? It's like, who knows? There's not even a twist. So it was an interesting episode that I don't think worked nearly as well as David Bennett Karen thought it did when he wrote it. Let's move on to the second segment of episode 5, Ye Gods.
The delicate thistledown of romance blows willy-nilly in the scented breeze of chance. On the other hand, perhaps true love is just a crapshoot, with the dice loaded and the odds rigged from on high Mount Olympus. A condo for immortals in that subdivision called the Twilight Zone.
All right, Ye Gods is directed by Peter Medak, written by Ann Collins, stars David Dukes as Todd Ettinger, who is made a example of by Cupid for being a yuppie. And he has to figure out a way to get Cupid and Megara back together so that Cupid will allow him to continue living his life and find the woman of his dreams that Cupid made him fall in love with. But again, okay, so another episode, I'm not really sure what was going on because it's a really narratively muddled episode.
That's putting it mildly.
Yeah, though I found it easier to follow than the previous episode.
Yeah, I mean, and I'll tell you what, this one is a lot more fun. Robert Morris as Cupid is tolerable. I mean, that's not exactly that's not exactly the best fucking compliment I can give you, but like, he was tolerable enough.
Yeah,
I like Robert Morris. I think he did a pretty good job. However, he sank into one of those tropes that I cannot stand, which is the I'm drunk, like the sort of like throw it back to vaudeville way of being drunk, like hiccuping and kind of, staggering a little, like that part of it. I was just like, ugh.
Yeah, that's my point when I say he's tolerable, because when he's not doing that nonsense, he's great. But when he's doing that stuff, it's like, oh, dude, come on. Nobody does this. This is a TV show.
Yeah. Yeah, and he's got only like basically 3 scenes, so having one of them, having him do that was just like, oh God, stop, please.
Yeah.
But love Robert Morris.
Yeah, if people haven't seen the Love one, definitely check that out. It's fantastic. But yeah, David Duke, who knew that he would go on from this to being the head of the KKK? That's kind of crazy.
What the fuck is There's something wrong with you, you know that? Man, that's fucked up.
I can't say that I'm familiar with David Dukes, the actor.
Yeah, most of the people in this episode are dead now.
Yeah, David Dukes and John Myers plays Bacchus. I think
Carolyn Seymour and Robert Morris are still going strong.
Well, Carolyn Seymour.
Robert Morris was in Mad Men.
Yeah,
yes, he was
just in that Art of the Deal, that kind of weird parody thing that Netflix was trying to do with Johnny Depp as Trump.
Johnny Depp's best performance in the last 10 years.
Oof.
I'm just kidding.
He was also Dominic Dunn recently in the American Crime Story, the People vs. O.J. Simpson. He was very good in that.
Oh, cool. And apparently he does voice work on Teen Titans Go as Santa Claus. So he does a lot of voice work, and so does Megara. She does a lot of voice work as well.
I think the biggest issue I have with this episode is that it, again, like, it has a really interesting premise, and the first couple minutes are great. And when you've got, like, Cupid coming into Todd Ettinger's office and, like, confronting him and, like, essentially condemning yuppies, I thought that was really fun, and like a little sly jab at yuppies. Not even sly; it's pretty on the nose. And then it becomes about getting Cupid back together with Megara, and it's like, this is okay. Like, this idea isn't as interesting as Ann Collins thinks it is, because she clearly thinks that this is the best idea ever. But it's just okay.
Yeah, this is like that Dee Wallace episode with hey, let's put supernatural forces in an office setting. Like, okay, now we have these anthropomorphized, Greek gods, like, among us, and how they're dealing with modern society. But let's not actually delve into that too far. Let's just turn it into a matchmaker thing where the human has to matchmake for them. And at the same time, first of all, like, they don't care at all about the David Duke story. The female character that he's supposed to fall in love with, do you guys know her character's name?
No. She doesn't even have one, does she?
Woman. I just assumed it was, I looked it up on IMDb, but I also just assumed it was woman because he just keeps saying this woman, that woman over and over again.
Way to go, Ann Collins. Can't even give her a name. I don't know. Like you said, like that, the opening scene, just like in the previous one, had a lot of promise. Like, I liked Robert Morris sort of castigating this guy in his office. Also, let me just point out, when he's shooting his bow, like that effect looked great. Like, yeah. I liked it then. It held up.
Yeah, I agree. And, that they made it pink kind of, brought it out of what could be reality and made it cartoonish, but I like that it was cartoonish, and it fit with the character really well.
So much promise. And then by the end, look, the opening scene of this is this guy discussing the basic, what is like a BMW he's going to be buying. And, by the end he has it, and was there a lesson for anybody? Like, was there a overarching plot, or is it just I don't get it, man?
Sir, the overarching plot is that gods are just like us. It's like one of those magazines at the grocery store at the checkout where it's like, see, these celebrities are just like us. They drink $12 cold pressed juice, don't you? It's like, no, you're missing the point here. And the sad thing about this episode is, again, there's so much promise and it is squandered, really squandered.
Yeah. I kind of didn't want to see Robert Morris and Carolyn Seymour get together at the end. I wanted them to fight and to take it in a whole different direction. And they have the same arguments that they had before, and it comes roaring back, and then maybe poor Todd Ettinger gets turned into a tree frog. She keeps talking about how she's going to turn him into something, and that never pays off.
Do it.
Right.
Because, the Todd Ettinger character is not, particularly sympathetic.
No. Because, they
not
said,
at all.
He's a yuppie.
Yeah.
Yuckies. Yes.
And it works. It's coming at a time where yuppies were being condemned in the media. You have a movie like Wall Street that's essentially a straight up condemnation of yuppies.
But this just kind of gets behind them in a way. We get the lip service at the end, and then he gets everything he wants at the end.
That's my point. It's such promise at the beginning, and then at the end it's like, just kidding. Yuppies are great. It's like, what? No.
Yeah. Even there was a second scene between him and his friend Peter there, where his friend is talking about some deal that he's made and how he felt like a god while he was doing it. Again, another moment where can we see the difference between humans and gods, evaluate them in some way? No, just a line to tie it back into the fact that we're going to be seeing gods. It doesn't explore anything to any sort of satisfaction.
And can I be honest with you guys? Ed Bacchus is the best character in this episode.
He sure is.
Hi,
it's
Ed
true.
Bacchus.
And he does like when people are mispronouncing his name, and yeah, I like it.
We all needed a big bottle of that wine.
Please.
And, it comes back to, in my mind, this idea of the Twilight Zone 1985 show. I can fault these episodes for not being great, but at the heart of them, they have an interesting idea. It's just whether or not the idea goes farther than just an interesting idea, if that makes sense. All of the episodes that we've watched, for the most part, have an interesting, kernel of an idea. It's just, do they actually do something with it, or does it just kind of fall flat? None of the episodes we've watched so far haven't had an interesting idea. I mean, think about, Wishbank. Yeah, it didn't expound upon the idea as much as we wanted. Still an interesting idea. Little Boy Lost had an interesting idea. It's probably the weakest one we've seen so far in regards to, ideas and originality. But again, it doesn't do anything with it.
Yeah, I think ultimately that's kind of the saving grace of the series, is that as hard as I want to slap some of these episodes down, the intent behind it started out good. It's just the execution ends up being sort of the same old tired short story trope, yeah, we've got this idea of these gods who need to fall in love, but it's just the same sort of sitcom kind of writing. Some of these writers on this show were fantastic and were coming at it, and Rocco Bannon, obviously, the episodes we've seen of his have been great idea, great execution, and I don't know, the others, I don't know, what am I going to say, that the writers weren't that talented? I mean, anyone can have a good idea, but it's how you lay it out afterwards.
Yeah, I'm very curious because both of these directors will be doing a lot of episodes of this show as we go along. And I think it was Hancock that did Kentucky Rye a couple episodes ago. So we've already seen one of his episodes, and then we'll see more as we go along.
Yeah, and what's weird? This episode came out October 25th, 1985. Why wouldn't they put a horror episode on right before Halloween?
Totally. Yeah, that was my question too. I was looking at the date and I was like, oh, this would have been their Halloween episode, because otherwise it would have been November 2nd or something. So yeah, it should have been a really scary episode.
Yeah. And I mean, we kind of get a ghostly thing in half of it, but not who's doing the programming? Who's deciding the order of the episodes coming out? I don't know.
Well, and it is strange, for sure. I agree 100%. And for a show like with a show like Twilight Zone, it's what? No, we're going to do an episode about the gods. Cool. Okay. It's just bizarre to me, so.
I mean, have we seen what we could consider a horror episode yet?
Night Crawlers?
Yeah, kind of. Well, I do think,
the Shadow Man's coming up.
I know, the Shadow Man is.
Why is that not here in this? Why didn't they slot it here?
I'm glad that you guys like the Shadow Man as much as I do.
Oh my God, I love it. Let's just skip ahead.
Let's just skip all the way to the Shadow Man.
Yeah, and then we can see the Invisible Man. I'll be happy.
Here's to the next episode being better. Fingers crossed. Knocking on wood.
Please.
Yeah, because this episode, again, good ideas, mediocre execution, for sure. So, speaking of the next episode, on the next episode of Dreams for Sale, we're going to be taking a look at episode 6 of the first season of the Twilight Zone 1985. That is broken up into 2 segments: Examination Day and A Message from Charity. So that should be interesting. Another 2-segment episode. Taking a little bit of a break from the 3-segment episodes that we've had seemingly back to back. So until then, where can people find you, Father Malone?
You can find me on my YouTube channel, Odd5 Films, my show You've Never Seen. Check that one out. And you can also hear me co-hosting a podcast about the HBO television series Tales from the Crypt, that is Chronicles from the Crypt.
Hey, I'm on that show.
What?
Oh, man. Oh, Jesus. And Mike White, where can people find you when they're not listening to Dreams for Sale?
Do you know what other show you're on, Chris? It's called The Kolchak Tapes, and you can find that at kolchaktapes.com.
What?
Yeah, he's on that one with me. It's kind of crazy. And also, I do a podcast called The Projection Booth, but nobody cares about that.
That's not true. That's a lie,
that's
and you
not
know
true
it.
at all. How dare you, sir?
How dare you downplay your own achievements? And you can find me on a little podcast I do called The Culture Cast, where I talk about movies. And sometimes Mike White is on, sometimes Father Malone is on, though it has been a while for Father Malone.
Yes.
Need to rectify that more than likely, but Mr. Mike White's on there quite often. And yeah, so check that out over at culturecast.com. Big thanks, as always, to Roxy Drive and Neutron Dreams for our intro-outro music. Head on over to twilightzone85.com where you can find our feed and you can find all the episodes of this show. We're only 5 episodes in, so go on back, listen to those 4 episodes, get yourself up to speed with us. Join us as we continue into Twilight Zone 1985 because we still have a long way, years to go, years upon years upon years to go. So it's
Jesus, don't say it like that.
I don't know how many years, but it's a lot. So yeah, and make sure to check out the next episode.